Okay, hi everyone. Sorry for the delay, and welcome to our webinar. Yeah, we called that Product Talk and how to approach, plan, and deliver an MVP. So today we have three speakers who will share their insights and experiences on various aspects of MVP development. Our first speaker is Chris, who is CEO at Zelt, which is like a next generation HR information system or like people ops system, who is also a seasoned investor in early stage startups with background in private equity and venture capital. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Anton. Great to be here.
We have one of our guests is Cameron, who is co-founder and CDO at CoNote, which is an end-to-end generative AI tool that streamlines user research process. Cameron has like a great product and design knowledge and can share a lot of his experience on starting CoNote. Welcome. Cameron, you are
Thank
muted,
you.
sir. Okay, we're still,
Start.
we're still waiting for Nimrod, the CEO at Cord, which is a collaborations SDK for the products. Hopefully he will join and share his experiences and he has a lot of experience both at startups and enterprise companies like Facebook. So yeah, hopefully he will join in the process, and it would be great. So we will focus on topics related on MVP development and different stages, from market research to actually releasing and having MVP in your hands, and we'll address questions from our listeners. So we gathered some like beforehand, but yeah, so we'll be checking chat and addressing what's there towards the end of the webinar. So yeah, let's dive into the discussion. So let's first talk about market research and like proof of concept. So what do you think, like how much time and resources you should actually allocate when you have the idea to move forward towards MVP development, or to decide if you even should do it? Maybe let's start with Chris. What do you think?
Yeah, so I would probably start with actually having no product at all. So I'd build a marketing website and emails to test whether people are actually responding to this. So most of the time you actually don't have to show your product. At least several touch points into the first interaction with your potential future customers. So there's actually no need to wait for 3 months or 6 months to get that feedback. So I would try to get potential clients on the call or in a meeting as soon as possible. I would not delay that until some MVP is ready. You can build a website on Wix in literally 24 hours. And you can buy them. They don't even cost much. And I would test your MVP before it actually exists. And I think once you've collected some insights around, hey, this is kind of confirming some of my hypotheses, and maybe you'll definitely learn something new where you already realize, oh, I'm kind of maybe my thought was going the right direction, but I have to maybe make some slight adjustments how people actually would want to use this. And I think then is a good time to start thinking about your MVP. So I think that's actually the most important bit about the research. To make sure that you don't spend 3 to 6 months time building MVP, then you have to change again, because once you start talking to customers, you realize actually should be slightly different.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, what do you think? Or maybe you have like some specific methods or like tricks to do that properly?
Yeah. Everything Chris said, like I agree with. For us, we were solving a very specific problem that we were experiencing. The market research that we did, right, we were looking at other competitors, seeing, first, does this exist? And then going from there, building it out. So we built our website, got that up and going. We were working on just like the design of the prototype itself, talking to people. So we just like jumped right in, trying to find right people to talk to, to see if this was, viable and going to work. So yeah, we just went straight. I mean, we are, a research company at its heart, right? So we went straight to that, went straight to the customer, trying to find the right people. Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? And then making those changes along the way.
So as I understand, basically, it's not in your opinion that much about like actual market research, like looking at competitors, but get to your like potential customers and to people as soon as possible and just like start talking to them, right? Uh, but there's always a problem that a lot of people don't want to like talk. They don't have the time. They don't like. They just don't agree to like share the information or find like no value in that. How do you overcome that?
So how do we work on getting to those people?
Yeah, basically, like I can write like 100 emails like to
Yeah,
my potential customers and like have zero responses or like nobody wants to really give us like some information. Do you have any tips on how to like improve that or how to actually talk to someone?
sure. Yeah, in my experience, I think a lot of people, especially, all right, so we started with definitely within like friendly, like our friends, and for us, we have people that are in the design community, or for me, and that are do UX research. So we were able to tap that, those resources and those relationships. And beyond that, I think a lot of people, when you reach out to them, right, like you're building something and you're building it for them. And I think that people want to be helpful and they want to like help you succeed. I think inherently we all want that. So, um, I think it's really just reaching out to people that are experts in that field and who you want to talk to. And, I think that more often than not, you'll find people that do want to talk to you.
Hmm. Chris, any specific tips on that? Sorry, Chris, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I would say if you send out 100 emails, you don't get a single response of somebody wanting to speak to you. It probably means one of two things. Either you don't know who your customer is, are you sending the email to the wrong
Hmm.
people, or nobody wants your product. In either case, you have a problem. So you should do another 100 emails with a different message and maybe to a different set of people. Because if you now spend 3 to 6 months time building something and then you figure out, oh, actually nobody wants this, or I don't know who the customer is, then you spend lots of money and time on building something that you can't sell. So I would just urge you to find a better set of 100 people, or maybe tweak the messaging.
Yeah, that's right. My example was like a bad signal in the first place. So and on like find like defining your like audience or like finding your customer. So like you have the idea, but how do you like actually form it and strike a balance between uh like going into like a specific niche and target like more niche like requests or audience, but at the same moment, like ensuring that you have a potential to growth and you're not kind of cutting yourself off like a ton of users that potentially could use your product and scalability in the future. Chris,
Um,
maybe yeah,
yeah,
let's start with you again.
I mean, there's lots of like talks about this around, how nobody expected that, computers are going to be such a big industry. And, when people started trading like Bitcoins, like whenever it was 10 years ago, nobody thought this was going to be like a massive deal. So I think, the honesty is like, the truth is like in the beginning, when some new markets start to appear, it's really hard to predict how big they're going to be. So I think you may as well focus on the things that you find interesting, um, and that you think are that you could see yourself working on for a long time. And I guess you need to have some luck that this market then turns out to be interesting, or you just go into a market that's already there, that's already big. Then that's pretty easy to figure out how big that market is. Um, and you'll have downsides there, right? Because there will be already some competitors and there'll be some incumbents there. So I think both are viable options. You could go for a brand new market. You don't know how the market's going to develop, or you can go for an existing market when it's pretty clear that's already big. And it'll be more difficult to get your first customers because people are already used to having a certain set of functionality, set of features, and you have to displace existing vendors.
Hmm.
Yeah, and for us, we are targeting a very specific niche audience right now in research, and and our approach is that if this works really well for them, right, then we'll be able to scale that out. right, for everyone else. So like making sure that it's really good and it's solid and it works really well for doing, deep research and like, for all levels, right? And then that will allow us to scale that out. So that's been our approach to that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you have some like methods or data sources like on how you gather insight about your audience and what is their like preference and needs. Maybe some examples of like we found like really interesting insights from here about like what people actually want from our product.
Yeah, for us, it's we're doing user interviews all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well,
um,
that's the core of the product pretty much.
right, and that's what CoNote is and does. So, we're able to do that and do a lot of it, because then we can run it through our project or our product, get those insights quickly. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that we're doing. We're always trying to find people that we can talk to, learn what their process is. How does that fit within our product? Making those adjustments, showing them. We're continuously showing them CoNote, the product. What can we make better? What do you hate about it? Right. We want to know all that stuff. What do you love about it? Right. So that's really the biggest part of how we're gathering our insights.
Mm-hmm. Chris, maybe you or like you also like mentioned that like if we are entering, for example, like the already existing market where there are some competitors, how do you approach like analyzing these competitors, or maybe some examples like on how competitors influence like your own product?
Yeah, so I think there is a certain level of, let's say, minimum, let's say, critical mass that you need to be a viable competitor in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's just a certain level of functionality. It's almost like the tide, like of the ocean, right? And the bigger the customers are that you want to work with, the higher is that level of, let's say, minimum set of requirements. But then you need a few peaks. So some things where you are really really good and much better than most others. And then you have to find those customers that really value those particular things, and then people will be able, as long as you've, let's say, fulfill the other basic requirements on a level that is high enough for kind of their minimum, then you have a very good shot of replacing an incumbent, even if it's a big, very established player. And if it's a big market, there will always be enough people who value those kind of specific peaks that you kind of service. It's just about like making sure that when you reach out to people that you mention those, let's say superpowers that you have. And when you do send 100 emails, yes, 99 people will probably not respond, or maybe 98. But there will be one or two people that will respond, and they'll really like that one thing that you do well. And then it's really about focusing on those people and see if you can close them.
Yeah. So and does it like I think like what you've said about like the bigger the clients, the like the more expectations will they have like from your product. Does that mean that like for if you're starting an MVP and you don't have like a huge budget, it's like not really effective to like develop something for like those big clients and try to go into like smaller SMB businesses or like whatever that you can actually handle with MVP?
I think there's two different types of products. There's probably more, but I would say there's fundamentally two different ones in terms of how you can sell to enterprises. So in our market, because we're kind of like a core platform to run your HR. So we're kind of horizontal in that way. So we're really a backbone of a pretty big portion of business processes. So there, I would say you can't really build an MVP for an enterprise. It will take you years. And without getting any feedback from your clients, it's very likely you're going to build something that in the end doesn't work well, or it doesn't work as company people actually want to use it. So I think for us, the strategy was, okay, if you want to build this kind of product, you have to start with smaller companies and then basically earn your way into the bigger league. If you're more like a, let's say, so this is, let's say, the horizontal way. If you're more like a vertical, you can run parallel to existing systems, or maybe you sit on top of them, or you make the existing systems better. And you're maybe like this more like isolated thing that doesn't need to now integrate with 50 other things, or there's not so much, let's say, reliance on the tool itself. So let's say if the tool went down overnight, like the company wouldn't just stop working. It would be annoying, but it wouldn't be the end of the world, right? I think when you're in that kind of market, you can't sell to big companies straight away,
Mm-hmm.
and also to small ones. So you can kind of sell to a big variety of companies. And I think there's a lot of examples for both. So I don't know, maybe like a Calendly, right? This calendar booking tool. you can sell to any company. And it works very similarly. And yes, there will be some features that enterprises will need, like maybe SSO and centralized billing and stuff like that, or maybe invoicing rather than credit card payments. But those features are much less than the features you'd need for an enterprise HR system. Ones take maybe months to build, the other one will take years.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, any thoughts on that, or maybe like in continuation of this, like if we actually start to talk about MVP, how to actually, I don't know, define what is your MVP, and not to go like too small, to like not to just win people, and not to go like too hard and spend like enormous amount of time developing something that is potentially not needed, or is just like a waste of resources and time.
Yeah, I think at previous experiences, there was some time that was spent, to like what Chris was saying, was spent chasing big clients, and it did not serve the product at all. Because then what happened was that, right, we were chasing the, vague promise that they would purchase it if we built it a certain way, right? And then that doesn't align with the product vision. So then you just end up hurting yourself and going into like technical debt, and it affects a lot of things. So like, in terms of like making sure, right, like, building the right thing, I think that, right, just always, right, like you start with the design of it, right? That it's not as expensive as like, developing the entire thing out and then taking that, right, to test it and see if it fits, right? You can, go in, create, get a designer, create a prototype. It doesn't even have to be the best looking thing in the world, right? It just needs to be like, this is my idea, this is the concept, this is how I can click through, go to this and do this, right? Does this resonate with you? Does this not resonate with you, right? Ask better interview questions, but go through that in that way. So to me, I think that is like the most valuable thing that you can do, with trying to build a new product.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, like with your experience and like a lot of it in the design, is it like hard for you to just say, okay, it does not need to look like okay or like perfect to be released or to be shown to anyone? Do you have like that professional kind of view on what is what should be done for MVP?
Yeah, I think that there's our first MVP was not that we did show people, was nowhere near high fidelity of what it
Mm-hmm.
ended up being, because we were moving fast, to get this out there. I think that it all comes into, right, when you're setting up what you're showing, right, as is with like anything, if you're just like, hey, like we're showing you a really rough prototype here, I really just want you to focus on XYZ, right? As long as you set that stage to whoever it is that you're showing it to, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. I mean, it's got to look good enough, right? But it doesn't have to be like super high detail, like we just picked colors. We didn't even have, like, we weren't testing any of that. So yeah, it doesn't matter completely, just as long as you set the stage for what you're showing.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what do you think? What is the most important like to achieve like with MVP, or like what is the most like important things to focus on?
I think it's important to understand, to set the boundaries of what the MVP should be. I think the purpose of the MVP is to get feedback from your users or your customers. But also, I think you can debate on how big or small the MVP should be, because I think also let's say the scope of the MVP that you set will determine what feedback you get, and you kind of start building this echo chamber. So we have a very broad platform, right? So we do HR and payroll and IT management. If we started with only HR, all the feedback that we get would be about HR. We learn more about HR, and probably most of the features we'd be building would be only about HR, and we'd actually never end up building all these other things. So for us, it was very important that we go live with an MVP that does those three things, even if they do it really badly and it's really ugly and we don't have time for proper UI, and probably the critical mass isn't reached on any of those. We went live with an MVP that can do all these three things, and it meant that we were able to collect feedback from day one on all those three things. And it means that we now have a platform 3 years later that really has really great functionality in all of those three things. While if we had launched with just the HR bit, I'm not sure we would have that today. It means, I think, that the MVP build is longer. Also, let's say, I think the period of pain will be longer because the more broad you go, the more gaps you'll find, right? And you have to fill those gaps before customers are actually willing to really pay and trust your platform. So we did this quite intentionally. So we spent quite a lot of time on building the MVP, and we knew that we're going to have a lot of gaps, and it was very painful for 18 to 24 months. But now that we went through this, we have a really awesome platform. We had a lot of feedback on all these things, and we're very confident about our product strategy and all three things because we've gained a lot of knowledge. So I think setting the MVP is also a, let's say, strategic decision on, where you see yourself in 3 years' time, and to make, or let's say in 5 years' time, to make sure that you get the feedback that you need to build in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think? Like a lot of people are talking about like not building like MVPs as like minimal viable product, but doing like minimal lovable product because of the increased expectations like from users of like products that they use. Is that a thing that like people should follow now, or like what it depends on?
Maybe Cameron, this one for you.
Yep. Let's
Sure.
do that.
Yeah. I think that this may sound like a lame answer. I feel like it's just like, if they love it, then they love it, right? Like if you're not building something that people don't love, then are you building the right thing, I guess? But, yeah, I guess I don't have any more to expand on it any further than that, right? Like if people don't want to use it, then they don't love it. And if they don't love it, then they're not like, then you're just like, then what are you even building anyways, right?
So in the end, it really depends on like if like they already are using something or not. Because yeah, in my experience, like yeah, if I really have a problem that I cannot solve, I will do like some like super hack like with downloading something from GitHub or like doing some script, and like I will curse, but I will do it. Uh, on the
Right.
other hand, yeah, so if I have like an alternative, yeah, it's worse, but it's more usable. Maybe I will not switch. Um, so and Cameron, so I know you like we worked with you, and you're like very good at documenting things and having like everything like written down, and like everybody knows what's happening. How do you ensure that like the your vision as like an owner or like CEO is yeah, really kind of shared like with the team that you are working with on MVP, even if it's like just like a couple of people, or you already have like a team of dozen people. So what do you do to ensure that everybody understands what we're building?
Yeah. Right now we have, weekly meetings and that are very specific to different things. And one of which is, very specific to that, right? The vision, and the vision has like adjusted and, shifted here and there, like slightly, right? Like we're still very much like we have our North Star and we know where we're going, where we want to be. But the way that we approach things, we do research and share it among everyone. So that way we are all in the know on what the customer is saying. And that helps us stay aligned, right, with the direction and where things are going. So a lot of it is very much just like being open and transparent, just from like top to bottom, on our vision, where we want to go, getting everyone aligned on that.
Mm-hmm. Chris, yeah, if I remember correctly, also I think you worked with like contractors on like your first like delivery of product, if I'm not mistaken from our discussions. How did you deal with that? So like it's just not the people super highly motivated as you are on like building the products. So how do you work towards like actually yeah, getting the right idea to them and making them build a product you want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there, particularly just having decent designs was very helpful. So um, I think that yeah, in the first months, just having very specific, very, let's say, clear designs on what the page should do and how the flow should work. And then the contractors that I work with, they were in the habit of deploying a PR every day. So you could literally see the MVP building up in front of you, and you could just literally start going into those flows and doing your clicks, right? And then you would realize maybe, I thought it would behave like this in the design, but now I realize, it kind of doesn't work that well. Can we please move it around? And I think it has to be this kind of really agile way, because especially your early designs I mean, if you have really a lot of empathy, maybe you can empathize by clicking through them or like seeing them. But once you have a mouse in your hand, you can actually click them. Things kind of change a little bit. So for me, it was very helpful that it was really like a day-by-day delivery. And it was also for me very fascinating to see the thing just kind of building up in front of me. It was really awesome. So, so I think that worked quite well. And I actually made the initial designs, and they were very off. They looked very horrible. But I think for the purpose of being able to click through them, it was good enough. So we actually stick with that design for quite some time until we redesigned the UI, and now it looks great as well. But I think for the initial, let's say, alpha and beta, that was good enough. And I think the fact that I did the designs myself removed one extra step of having somebody else in the middle that I have to explain it to. And every time, I think some of the message gets diluted when you tell it to somebody else. So by me doing the designs directly to the engineer, it meant that the feedback cycle was very fast, and there wasn't a lot of, let's say, dilution in the middle. So I think that helped quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. And like while building the MVPs, do you like actually tend to, okay, so you for example, you did designs yourself, and that was a help, but like explaining and writing down what like this feature should do, how it should work, or do you tend like just like writing a lot of things down from the very start and get it all like structured, or having like believing in like that people understand like what is being done here, and having a very basic design is enough to like move forward without like a lot of bureaucracy and like tickets and documentation and so on.
I think it kind of depends on the complexity of the particular feature. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some features where, yes, you have to be very specific and you have to write down all the requirements, especially when there's a lot of stuff happening in the background where maybe on a design screen, you wouldn't actually necessarily see like what that does unless you build out click flows for all the different flows. But in reality, you don't have time for that either. So I think in that sense, in that case, I would write down the requirements and explain them, and then literally it's almost like a hard acceptance criteria, right? I will only see this as accepted when literally we go through those things and tick them off. But I think with a lot of other things where it's a bit more clear, maybe it's a simple flow, right? You put in some data and there's like a stepper and there's like okay in the end. There it's more about like I think the designs and the requirements don't have to be now maybe this strict. And maybe, frankly, I don't really know them myself yet, right? Because once I start using it, I realize maybe, I need a bit more data or a bit less data, or maybe 4 steps actually feels a bit too long. Maybe it should be 2. Let's cut this one out. And I think it's a bit of like depends on maybe how good and fast your designer is. But the reality is, I just didn't have a designer then. We didn't have the money to pay for one either. So that was just the reality, and my time was limited. So I didn't have the time to create perfect designs. But the engineers were very experienced, so they could take the minimum information, and I would explain to them how it should behave, and they kind of were able to fill out the blanks. And it wouldn't always be 100% how I intended it, but that's also kind of okay because the deployment cadence was so quickly. Let's say those inaccuracies in translating my thoughts into their heads didn't cascade, right? So if, let's say, you do this now over 3 weeks, and let's say in each of those steps you have like a 10% deviation, all of a sudden your product looks totally different than what you would have liked it to be. But if you have this quick feedback cycle, you can take corrections very easily and very quickly, and it doesn't cost too much either. So I think in that part, or during that time, it was quite okay to work on, I would say, pretty limited information and not great designs and not great requirement descriptions. I think today maybe it's slightly different, where we have a bigger team, and we need to make sure that we reuse our components, and that the requirements are all met, because there's now a lot more features that are dependent on each other. So there you have to be a bit more careful that what you build doesn't break 5 other things in the app.
Mm-hmm. Cameron,
Yeah.
how did you start, and what was your approach on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Chris was saying as well. Our typical motto with doing this work is just like, move fast. Like, we'll break stuff here and there. That's all right. We'll fix it. We're not going to know how things are going to really work unless we, put it out there. And I think that, the number of times I've designed something where I'm just like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the stuff. And then I put it out there and then people are just like, I don't understand how this works. Like that definitely, and you're just like, oh yeah, I see that now. Like then I open it and I'm clicking through. I was like, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know what else, is it's hard, especially for us. I'm the sole designer too, so like I have to be like in it, and then I have to be like, then I got to adjust and look at it from out here, right? So it's good that like we have my other co-founders, Nisha and James and Carol, a researcher, that they're able to help me with that, as well as our development team at Upsilon are like, they will also make great suggestions. So I think it's always nice to just have and find a collaborative team that can help you, find your way, and keep you grounded in that, because like it is really hard
Mm-hmm.
to stay in it and then also see it from out here too, right?
Yeah, it's good to have like a couple of more like verifies to look at what you've done if it's actually makes
Mm.
sense. Okay, let's move to like the next topic, which I think is like should be interesting to a lot of like people that want to start a startup, which is actually budgeting, or like how do you make it happen and how do you not run out of money. So maybe Cameron, like maybe you can share a bit of your experience with CoNote on what should you actually look in terms of budget? Is it only like budget for development? What do you actually need to count towards, like, okay, I need to have that money to release a product? Or did you try to get some like funds or investor money to like release the first version?
Yeah, we were initially, to get, a lot of the upfront money, we did just an initial round of, like angels, family and friends type of thing. So, we went through that round. And then from there, we were definitely very intentional about where we allocated funds to. Like, obviously, right, we're building a product. So a lot of that has to go into dev time, and development. So a lot of it was spent on, and is currently, it's being pushed towards that,
Mm-hmm.
as we move towards, getting ready to do an actual round of investment. So a lot of it is, a lot of it is really just like us being very intentional. We have meetings and talk through like where we're going to spend, where we're going to put that to, what do we absolutely need, what do we not need. And then there are also great resources, through the different banks that you can go through that have like a lot of perks. Like we have one that's got a bunch of different like 50% off like coupons and like tokens and credits for all kinds of stuff. So, we definitely utilize that to also help us stretch out that runway, to save as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what was your approach to like budgeting your MVP, and how did you do it?
I find I struggle a lot with this. I guess everything takes longer than you think, to start with. So whatever you budget, just budget more, more time, I guess. I think in the end, it's more like actually backwork solving, because you can raise the amount of money that you're able to get, and that's kind of it. So even if you now say, hey, my budget says I need 3 times the amount of money, investors will say, well, I don't care. This is what we're going to give you. So it's more like, okay, this is the money that you have, and you have to work with those constraints. And that means you can only either, afford 1, 2, or 3 developers. And that kind of then determines also the scope of your MVP. So, and in reality, then I think it's more like you actually don't know yet what your MVP will be, because you kind of go into it, and you realize, okay, I think now maybe I'm ready to have my first customer based on the conversations. And ideally, you have those. I think I didn't do that correctly in the beginning. I think I did not do these fake marketing conversations that I mentioned in the first question that you should do. I now realize there's no reason to wait for these. So ideally, by the time you start building MVP, you already have your first customers lined up and they're kind of interested in what you're building. Remember, otherwise they wouldn't have taken that call in the first place. And you kind of check in with them every now and then, say, hey, this is what we have now. And you kind of just ask them, hey, do you think you want to use this now maybe? Or like you want to become our alpha? We would love to invite you to our alpha customer base and we give it to you for free. And, we'll give you extra special treatment from when we fully release, etc. And I think you'll then realize when you're ready to have your first customer. And I guess that's then your MVP, because then once somebody starts using it, I guess that means this is now a minimum viable product. And that's kind of how it worked for me. So I guess at the time I actually didn't know yet what was even my MVP. I knew exactly the direction. I didn't know yet when we were going to be ready for the first customer or what would be the features that a first customer would want. And frankly, customer A would have a different feature that's important to them than customer B. So it's also a bit of a function of who do you happen to speak to that's interesting in your product overall. And then, you just kind of take it step by step. So for me, I didn't really have the traditional kind of, our MVP costs X. It was more about, okay, I managed to raise this funding. Super happy. Let's get a contractor or two working. And then, we work towards the things that we want to build and get our first customer on the platform as soon as they're willing to take that leap of faith, right? And for us, it took 6 months. And for others, it may take 1 month or 2 months. So I think it depends on what you're building.
And do you think like it is like as I understand the situation, it's like getting harder and harder to like raise some money just on a sole idea, even it's good enough. So you actually need to find some money to build a product and then go to investors to seek additional funding just to like run this forward and like improve your products and actually get like more customers. Is that right, or do you think it's like just depends on the idea, but you still can get the investors' money?
I think you still can get investors' money. So what I hear from in my kind of friends and friends of friends circles, that people are raising based on ideas and let's say their track record, and it's not just the idea, right? It's the track record of the idea and let's say the foundation behind your idea. So if you convey that this is not just an idea, but actually we have very reasonable grounds as to why we think this is can be a big business, people are still raising. I think actually it's becoming particularly harder to raise after that stage. So while maybe 2 years ago you could have raised on an idea and you could raise again based on the same idea and some product, but still no real revenue, I feel like this second step now has completely fallen away. So I think you can still raise money based on a proposition, but then when you want to raise again, you have to have something to show. In most cases, that means some real customers, some real revenue, and this kind of stage in between has kind of dried up. So it also means that I think when you do raise money, you have to be aware that you raise enough so that you can actually produce something that allows you to show something. So um, that means maybe the whole kind of budgeting and how much money do you actually need is maybe now more important than what it was 2-3 years ago, because assuming that you had a really great idea and you are able to execute on a product vision and maybe have your first few alpha customers, that may have been enough to raise more funding a couple of years ago, but perhaps not anymore today.
Mm-hmm. I see. Cameron, what do you think, and when did you start approaching investors, and what did you show them? What did you promise them?
Yeah, I think, for us, what we've noticed is that it's a lot easier for, like Chris was saying, like people with a proven track record or, exited founders, from what we've seen, so like our approach has definitely been that, right, meet investors, get on their radar early, just, build relationships and just show them this is where we're at, this is where we're going, and then check in with them every few months to show them that progress. So we're showing them that we are, we're doing what we're saying. You could go back and look at the roadmap. We're hitting all of those things, right? We're showing progress. And I think a lot of, from what we've seen, is that investors want to see progress, as well as, right, like any semblance of like are people willing to pay for this? I think that has definitely become more of a thing, right? Where it isn't off of an idea, right, anymore. So that's like the what we have found is like build those relationships really early, plant those seeds, you know. Yeah.
Hmm. And so also, like for example, you're going like the route with investors. You're not bootstrapping. Like you actually got some money. Uh, it is like a pretty big shift in terms of like, yeah, we've built like the MVP and we were like conserving our resources and doing that, and now we actually need to start going fast and like start delivering, and like, yeah, so the situation is changed. How to keep yourself like not running out of money, how to focus on this like idea, or like what you actually need to deliver. Do you have any suggestions or tips for that? Because like I think that is a pretty big shift if you're successful with your product.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, you know, more of what I was saying earlier too, where I think it's like really determining like what do you actually need to spend money on, and
Mm-hmm.
what, you know, what can you do yourself, you know. I think that like when Chris was saying, you know, where he did the design himself, like I think that's amazing, right? Like that's you know, I think that it doesn't need to be professionally designed to be, you know, a viable product. Like you don't need to pay all that money to do that, right? If you can like make it work and get in there and learn something new, you know, along the way, it'll make you better in the end anyway. So I think, you know, finding those, you know, those easily cuttable corners like that, where just doing as much as you can yourself. You know, I was like, it's not like there's no quick way, right? To be like, this is how you do it. It's really just like, you just got to do like a bunch of stuff yourself is really it. And just like, all right, well, I can't pay for someone to do this because I can't afford it. Um, yeah. Chris, do you have
Yeah,
something you
I
want to
couldn't
add?
agree more. Yeah, I'm nodding very lost here. I mean, I see a lot of startups spending money on things where I'm like, oh my god, like don't spend money on this. Keep your money in the bank account and do more stuff yourself. Like, especially in the beginning,
Mm,
as Cameron said, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to spend 50 grand or 100 grand on a website. Just do it on Wix. Like, just buy it somewhere. You know, just copy
right.
it from a competitor. It really doesn't matter. And yeah, just focus on literally the bare bone. I think the MVP is very important, right? So of course you need to spend in engineering resources because somebody has to write that code.
Mm,
And yeah, design you can do yourself, and the website you can do yourself, and you don't need a lawyer, and you don't need an attorney, and you don't need an accountant, and you don't need an advisor, right? You don't need any of this. You just need to be on. You just need to be on the coding. You know, write your code or have somebody to write it for you, and just you know, push product, talk to your customers, see if somebody bites, right? Or if you already have customers, great, get feedback, make it better, and get more customers, and just go
mm,
through that cycle until you have your first customers. And I think that's when you got your MVP, right? When you have a customer, I guess that's the MVP. So just do step by step until you get there, and keep your money in the bank as much as you can until you get there.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we mentioned like user feedback once again. I have a question like regarding, okay, so you got some feedback, but you had a plan in mind, so you have some your roadmap like lined up, like you're working towards that feature. But some of your user feedback or what you're getting is going in a different direction from your vision, your current vision. How do you work with that? So and how do you define, okay, so we do we actually like follow like this feedback, and but that may be just like a few customers but we have them, or I need to follow my vision because this is where the product actually will shine, and we will get like more from what we're building now than just following this this like insights.
I think this is a very
Cameron,
important
maybe.
question.
Oh,
Ah,
Chris.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, okay,
Uh,
okay, go on, go on.
um, yeah, I think it's a super important question because if you let, I think it's, and I think I have maybe a slightly more balanced, or maybe not contrarian, but maybe more balanced view. So, you know, people always say listen to your customers and just do what they say, basically. But I would say, you know, I I would absolutely only build things that go into the vision that you want to, you know, move into. Um, and you know, it's always like, I think Steve Jobs said it, right? Like we build stuff that we don't ask our customers what they want because they don't know yet that they want the iPhone, but when they see it, they will know it. So probably if you were and I guess that how BlackBerry went down that path, right? So that the BlackBerry, and they just listened to their customers and they said maybe, oh, this button should be a bit bigger and a bit smaller, but actually what you should be building is a phone without any buttons because they're just annoying. So I think, yeah, you have to be a bit careful. And I think that also comes down to knowing what your vision actually is. And once you know what your vision is, it's very easy to distinguish the feedback that's useful and the feedback that's not useful. That's not difficult at all. I think when you don't have a vision, that's the problem. When you don't really know what is the feedback I should be listening to or should not be listening to. So I think it's important to understand, what you want to build, where do you want to be in 5 years time or 10 years time, and then separate that feedback. And there's also bad customers, right? So there are absolutely customers that you shouldn't take on because they'll give you the wrong feedback and you build a product that you don't want to be. And yeah, you should absolutely disregard the feedback that is not useful to your, let's say, not useful to your vision. I think if you don't get any feedback that goes into, let's say, supports your vision, then maybe you have the wrong vision. So maybe you should reconsider. But unless that's the case, I think, don't listen to all the feedback that you get.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, what do you think, or how do you
Or listen to it,
define
but
like
don't
good
build
and
after
bad
it.
feedback?
Don't cater for it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes, the customer is wrong and they don't know what they want. Like that's absolutely, like that can happen. I think like one of the, the example I always give when I talk about these things is like, so I play like video games, and it's like gamers are some of the worst people, like where they just ruin everything because the feedback that they give is to like make it, especially with like competitive games where they're like trying to balance it in the way that they want and they think is right, but they have no concept of what is actually, like how it's actually built, or like how they could, they're just like, oh, I don't know why they don't just do this thing. Right. So yeah, right. I think that you want to make sure that the feedback aligns with the vision, right? Because sometimes, you internally, right, what the roadmap is, where you're going. So, they may have feedback on something that you're like, well, this is the foundation for where we're going. So, like, I mean, it's either you come along with us or, like, I guess, not. Now, in terms of like, sometimes like, yeah, I think, taking feedback where something's hard to use, right? That's one thing, right? But if it's very much just like against your vision or negative feedback against that, and it's just, you're just not along for the ride with us, and that's okay, right? I'm sure there's another product that, would be helpful for that. So, yeah, it's really just about discerning the feedback and making sure it's aligned with your vision. Yeah. There's no science to it. You just got to like feel it out.
Yeah. Okay. So probably like the next thing I want to ask is like a lot of times is what happening is like we have an idea, we've built an MVP, we have like a couple of people that we actually like reached out ourselves and they got interested, and we have a product, we released it, and what I need to do next. So what is like how do you approach the launch of MVP itself? How do you get users engaged, or how do you get like the product in front of them? Like, do you need to spend like money on marketing and so on? So what was your experience? How do you approach this? What would be your suggestions on that? Chris?
Yeah, I guess maybe B2C and B2B are slightly different here. I think in B2B it's pretty simple. Like you just send emails on LinkedIn. They cost you nothing. They're pretty easy to write. You can buy a tool that you pay 50 quid and you can send hundreds of emails in an automated way. And those should be enough. That should be enough to get you the first sales calls. And I think you should sell them as sales calls, even if maybe you don't have a viable product yet, because keep in mind your customers don't know that yet. And I think use that as an opportunity to get feedback and understanding of what they want, but then also align that with, okay, what do we have right now? And sometimes that will align. So sometimes the things that they mention, oh, we really want to solve this problem, you may already be able to solve that today. So when you're in a call and you realize that, that's when you should absolutely switch away from, hey, this is a feedback call, to this is a sales call, and you should try to close that customer. And it probably won't be your first call. It may not be your second call. It may not even be your third call. But eventually, you'll come across that person where you can make that sale, and then it's just about you selling it, and that will be your first customer. I think B2C maybe it's slightly different. I don't know if in any B2C offering, I think email marketing also works there. So I guess you could send a bunch of emails as well. But I do have to say I don't have much experience in B2C marketing because we're in B2B, and I think for your first customers, emails will definitely suffice.
Mm-hmm. So you would not suggest like spending a ton of money on like ads,
Zero.
marketing, so zero. Okay,
Zero. Yeah.
perfect. Cameron, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. We haven't spent anything on like marketing or advertising, or it's not the right time to do that. I think that, right, like Chris was saying, reaching out to people, emailing, LinkedIn. So for us, right, like it's we are more B2C. We have, we will, do some B2B stuff, of course, right? Because we are a SaaS platform. We want to get, customers coming in through that way. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the things that we focused on just to grow, and it's kind of just happened organically, like as soon as you just start posting too, like it's kind of, you just post and like make connections, talk to people, like things will start to happen. It just like, it builds slowly over time. And then things will happen, but you got to be, you have to be consistent. You have to keep reaching out to people. You have to keep posting. Um, for us, it's, also like thinking about like, what is your product, and like how can that fit within the landscape, and like who can you contact, right, that can get that going. So for us, right, we are a new way to do research. So it's like a brand new type of way to do this. Like there's, of course we're talking to researchers and, going with their process. So we have partnerships where we've worked with um, different programs that teach UX to designers, right? So we've reached out to them, right? So they're entering the workforce with the knowledge of who we are, right? So if we do enough of these, right, so we'll build up over time, and then that will spread, right? And then who knows, maybe they'll go to like their next company, their first job, and say like, well, I used this, like, when I was doing my project, and it actually helped me a lot, right? So I think it's like finding those ways where you can, get in with your customer base in a way that will set you up for later.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and we've mentioned like email, LinkedIn, like your personal contacts and connections. Can you mention any other like strategies or channels that like work for you at some point?
Yeah, we have more or less, I was like, Twitter's gone. It's a lost cause. For us, we're pretty much on LinkedIn.
Uh,
Yeah, I think for us right now, LinkedIn is where we're at, and Instagram, we post on that as well, like for social media. Yeah, I think that I'll be interested to see how all of this goes in the future with social media and the direction that I think it's going. We'll see.
hmm And and Cameron, do you like at this point of time, like you released not so long ago, how like into like actually defined metrics and KPIs are you in like with your sales in terms of like emails, how they're delivered, or our connections, or how many leads we get like from this, and what works, what's not. Do you go hard on that, or are you just like doing what you're doing? Um,
Yeah, we're not going, we have an email list that we built up, and like, we have everyone that's like logged in as a user, but we're not pushing that right now too hard.
mhm,
I think that's something that we are going to ramp up next year. It's just like, our time and resources between us, we're a small team. We've just had to focus in different areas, but that type of marketing is definitely beneficial, because there are all kinds of different campaigns and things that you can set up within the email, right? Like re-engagement, like, if someone signs in for the first time, they don't come back, trying to get them there, recommendation, right? There's all kinds of different marketing strategies that you can do with email. We just haven't we just haven't had the time to really dig into that and push that. So a lot of our time is spent just like personally reaching out to people, which is also kind of, that's like nice and some ways better, right, than just
mhm.
receiving an automated message like it's from a real person. Um, and there's value to that too.
Chris, and maybe like the same question, but like from the point of, okay, so you have a product and you have some usage and you have like some leads or some sales. What is the key things that you need to follow to actually, I don't know, to show to investors? What would be like the most important things that like, yeah, say like to other people that, yeah, that product has potential and it's growing, and in what would you do with your data to show that? Chris, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm unmuted now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also B2C and B2B may be slightly different propositions here, but I'm speaking now from a B2B with my B2B hat on. I think yes, you can show user behavior and sign up metrics and like your wait lists and all that kind of stuff and how much time people are spending on the app. Ultimately, that should flow through to revenue, right? Because if people are spending time on the app, they should be willing to pay for it. So I wouldn't wait to monetize for too long, because I think if people are willing to spend time with you on sales calls and are willing to use your product, they're probably also willing to pay for it. And I think one mistake that a lot of people make is just wait too long to just ask to get paid. And I know the first asking for the first time can be a bit awkward, a bit weird, and maybe you're still very insecure about your product, and maybe you think it could be 100 times better, and it should have all these other features that you haven't had the time to build yet. But I think you should ask for it earlier, and many investors will want to see that as a proof point that this is a real thing. Because yes, they could speak to your customers, and maybe the customers would tell you how amazing your product is, but the reality is, a lot of people don't want to do that, and they don't have that much time. So if they meet 30 companies a month, right, they don't want to call all their customers. And frankly, you don't want to give them intros either, because if you speak to 100 investors, you're not going to have 100 customers to introduce you that are willing to spend an hour of their time to talk to investors, right? So um, I think you'll have to go down to revenue, and I think you'll have to show that you're able to monetize. But then, of course, once you're there, then there's a lot of other metrics that you have to show, and like upsell and churn, all that kind of things. But if you can show that you have revenue and it's growing, I think that's after all that's what matters, and I would focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So we're closing to like our time and what we have. So I would go through some questions that were in the chat and some questions that we were asked like during the registration. So we have one interesting question is the chat is from Sam, who is like Sam Altman here. Could you suggest a situation when your chief board wants you out after your MVP succeeds? That is an interesting one. I guess we will skip that. There are a few like questions. Okay, so have you bought any research or reports from uh, Chris? Okay, sorry, Chris have to go, but Chris will answer later. Okay, so like Cameron, we will probably need to finish that. So have you bought any research or reports from those stats providers or websites? Do you think it is worth the money? Worth?
I have not used CoNote. No, I haven't used those. So I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
Hmm. And that was a question like to Chris, but yeah, we can talk about that. So what about the concern on like others taking your idea concept and running with it faster during the market research process?
Yeah, I think we because obviously, like, we have competitors, right? Everybody does. I think that uh, I think what you need to keep what is solid, and for us, it's our vision and where we want to go. It's about it's not worth our time to do the exact same thing that someone else is doing. So like
Hmm.
we have a vision in mind that is different. So therefore, like we're watching them, right? We're watching everyone. So we're seeing what everybody's doing. But we know that our vision is about transforming research in a new way that that no one else is doing. So, I think that we're holding steady, and we were, at the time as well, there were some times where we're just like, like you go back and forth on this, where, you're worried and then you're not. And, but I think that if you really believe in it, and you just stay the course, you just stick to what your vision is, and don't, deviate when you have data points to back it up, but don't just like change it because you see someone else is like doing something right. I mean, honestly, that gives you the opportunity to see. I was like, okay, well, if they've done this, what's their deal, right? Then you can go and use it, and then see, and then like, okay, well, I would do it like this to fit my vision, right? If any, like you could use it as a benefit, like like tangentially across that, right? Like we'll look at you just look at websites, right? If anyone is saying like, I need to build a website or a product, like big companies have already spent all of this money to do that research, and they're doing stuff on their product is built and their website is built a very specific way based off of research that they've done. Sure, the messaging is different, but like use their experience, so why, analyze why they've done a certain thing, and emulate that.
Hmm. Uh, okay, yeah, that works. Another question is, what is the difference between developing a vision for an MVP and a full-fledged product? I guess difference in approach on how you do it. Uh, did you have that? Like, do you have like a vision of like the full product and where you're going? But yeah, we keep that here, and we're focusing on MVP right now, and we need to act differently on that.
Yeah, we have the vision and where we wanted to go, and we still have that. And then anything that we build, so the vision is like us just sitting in a room and like talking about it, really, and then like drawing it on a whiteboard, taking a picture of it and having it. But and then the MVP, right? Like we know where we want to go, where we want to be, the big stuff, right? So anything that we build in the MVP currently is always a foundation, right? We're working backwards. We know we want to be here, but what do we need to get there? We need to do this and this and this and this, right? In order to do this, we got to do this, and like so far down. So like we're very much like working on that foundation of our MVP. And the other thing too is that like you can use it now, like it's available to use now. So like, but it's still an MVP, right? Like it's still the very early stage of what we're building, but it's also usable. So making sure that like it's not our vision of what the version 1 of MVP is, like to there, but even that is like this part of that vision, like the roadmap, right, where we're going here, and like even that is like here, right? We got
Mm-hmm.
big plans, and it's really just about laying that foundation down and just getting it out there, get some feedback, see what people think.
Another question like regarding this is like, have you ever fallen into a trap of planning more that is needed, and like how do you actually work with that or battle that problem?
Yes, we have run into that. What we did was we had to take a step back and say, is this actually needed for this release? Or like, do we actually need to do this? I mean, we've had to do that. Like for the first release, we didn't fall into this trap. It was just like an intermittent release between, because we're trying to get to that, like what we want so badly that we're, like jamming a bunch of stuff in. And then we had to take a step back and be like, is this actually the vision of what, the MVP is and should be and should do, or are we just trying to like jam a bunch of stuff in here because we want to get to here way faster? So we found that, right, and we pulled that stuff out and rearranged it. So and now it's enabled us to like really focus on getting this, the things right and working well.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, let's say you've released an MVP, but it's failed or not performing well. What would you do in that situation? So how do you act?
Yeah, I think that thankfully this did not happen to us. Yeah. I think that we would take a step back. Research and talking to people is everything. We would absolutely go to that with very specific questions and talk to people. We would try to find, if anyone used it, talk to them, especially like at this, if it failed, right? Like, did anyone use it? what did we miss? Like why were we so off the mark? I think we would just have to go back and really dig into and have hard conversations about what happened here. So I think it would just start there, just an open conversation with yourself and with your team about like what happened, what did we miss, and ask
Yeah,
those
just
questions.
go back to step zero pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, you're a young startup looking for funding or hoping that users will start paying a lot. You get a big client, but they ask you for very specific features that most users won't need. What are you going to do?
Yeah. So this is one of those things where you don't want to build your product for right exactly this because no one else wants to use it. But what you can do is charge them enough money to where what they're paying for pays for that on their platform, right? So you just get them to pay for the development of it, essentially, and then extra, right, to make a profit. So to me, that's like an opportunity to get them to pay for a new feature that you can then implement like
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere, right? You're just getting like free development work, right? So like that's how I would approach this too.
Mm-hmm. What are the main post MVP activities?
I think it's always iterate. It's the same. I mean, like sure, like if the MVP's out, right? We did it. It was like great. We'll celebrate for like a day, and we're like, all right, well now what's not working with it, right? There's always stuff to improve on in anything that you're building, any product. Always take a look at the website. You can go fix that. Like, do we need to update the copy? Has you know customer opinion changed on certain things? Like, it's always the same stuff. So you're always iterating and figuring out where to go next.
Mm-hmm. What are the most innovative and effective methods for generating product ideas and conducting market research for free? Obviously, you have like user interviews. Uh, they're the king, as they understand. Do you have any other examples?
Generating product ideas. Yeah, I
Uh,
think I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be like saying this is the most innovative thing I found, but I think, using other people's products, I think goes a long way, right? Getting inspiration from other people, other products, look at, your competitors, look at someone who's not even, like maybe you're using Spotify one day and you realize that like there's some feature in Spotify that you're just like, wow, this, like if I rethought about this or retooled it in a way, I could make that work for, something that I'm doing. I think it's just always a process, and it's hard for me to say like this is the method that I would do. Everybody's a little different too,
mhm.
especially like their creative process. But I think just being open to inspiration from anywhere, like anything, like not just probably like movies, music. Like sometimes I get inspiration from a movie for design. Like that's not a one for one trade, but it happens.
And probably the last question, can you share your experience of acquiring customers for a Bootstrap SaaS platform?
Yeah. It's been a lot of really like trying to do organic growth because we're not spending on marketing and advertising right now. We don't have the budget for it. So it really is just like reaching out to right people, that everyone that we know, hey, use this, like, and then tell us what you think. Looking for design partnerships with other people, right? We're giving them, you know, like we're giving them this product at like a discounted rate, and then they're providing us with feedback to help us make it better. Um, and then right, being consistent, like on social posting, we've gotten things from LinkedIn. People have found us. Um, User interviews, and then the student process. Like it's really just about like, especially early on, like you just want to reach out to anyone and everyone that will listen. Start with your friends. it's like building a band. You know, when you start out in a band, you like got to beg your friends to come see your first show and the subsequent shows, and then it grows from there. You know, like it's very similar in that way, and how you build and how you build out, and it happens over time if you just stick with it and keep doing, just keep reaching out, keep pushing. Like the growth will happen over time.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I don't see any more questions in chat. So yeah, Chris needed to go early. Cameron, if you want to add something like your best advice for building MVP, yeah, you can do that, or any last words. And yeah, we will finish our recording on that.
Yeah, sure. I think that I think what really stuck with me was something that Chris had said earlier too, about where he had designed, you know, he put together his first design. And I think that a lot of times, you know, like I have an art degree. So like I've gone through, you know, where you're like trying, you know, you put yourself in the art that you create, no matter what it is, even if it's like UI design, like it's still art in and of itself. And I think sometimes it's hard to get past that I'm not good enough, or this isn't, you know, putting your ego aside, you know, like no one's going to get this right. Like just do it, you know, like it's everyone, more often than not, everyone wants to support each other and like that. And we will, you know, and I think that if you just get out there and you just create and just make what's in your head, like everything will come together. And, you know, and it's also just fun. Like let's just get out here and make stuff.
Okay, great. So Cameron, thanks a lot for joining. Everybody who was listening, thank you all. We'll also provide the recording of the whole webinar. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. That was great. There was like a lot of good insights and suggestions. Thank you for your time, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you another time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.